Welcome, everyone. My name is Andrew Goodliffe. I am the Associate Dean in the Graduate School and responsible for admissions, recruitment, and the all-important funding. So I wanted to tell you a little bit today about funding at the University of Alabama. And to do this, I'm actually going to take you through a very important page on our webpage. So I am going to share my screen. So hopefully you all can see the graduate school webpage. So as prospective and students and applicants, this is a great place for you to come and look at resources. Of course, there's a lot of information about admissions requirements, program listing, international student specific information. There's our frequently asked questions page for admissions. And then there is our paying for graduate school page. So I'm going to take you to this page. So what we've tried to do on this web page is tell you about the various funding options, both internal and external, that might be available to you as a prospective student, applicant, or admitted student at the University of Alabama. Now, first of all, one of the important things to know is how much does it cost to come to school at the University of Alabama. And the first link here is our International Student and Scholar Services, where we have an estimate of how much it costs to attend the University of Alabama. Now, before you're too shocked by the number at the bottom, 56,166, I do want to state that a lot of our funding options can cover the entire cost of attending the University of Alabama. But this is a very useful tool just to see, about how much is it going to cost. And at the University of Alabama, we have tried our best to make sure this is a realistic estimate of how much it will cost you. Now, if, for example, you got an assistantship offer, and we'll go into what that is in a second, that assistantship offer may not be $56,000. It may be $50,000. In that case, we really do think it's very important that you show that you have the ability to cover that differential, in this case, $6,000. Because again, that 56,000 is a realistic estimate of how much it'll cost. So in terms of the potential sources of funding, we have this table which lays out some of those funding sources. Now, to give you some perspective, we have about 6,000 graduate students at the University of Alabama. And out of those 6,000, about 1,800 are on assistantships. So in terms of where do students get most of their funding, it really is in the form of assistantships. So let's go first to assistantships. So when we're looking at assistantships, there are two main kinds, and there's another less common kind. So probably the majority of students at the University of Alabama, graduate students, are on a graduate teaching assistantship. So this is where we provide funding, and in exchange, the student helps with teaching. And that can take many forms. It could be, if they're qualified, they're leading a class. It could be that they're helping out in a class. It could be they're leading a lab class. It could be they're just grading. So it's going to vary by program, by where you are within your program, etc. The next most common kind is the graduate research assistantship. Graduate research assistantships are where you might be helping a professor with research. In most cases, the funding for these is coming from an external source. So it might be that the professor has funding through the National Science Foundation, through the US Department of Energy, etc. The level of support is very much the same as the graduate teaching assistantships, just the nature of the work is different. So again, you're really working for a single professor helping with research. Now, what do you get when you have one of these assistantships? So most assistantships are going to include a stipend to help cover living costs. And so this is in addition to a tuition scholarship. So we cover all your tuition and we provide you living costs. Those living costs vary quite a bit by program. At the lower end, that might be as low as 17,100. At the higher end, that's going to be more like 34,000. In the US, and probably if you're from outside the US, probably in your country as well, in addition to tuition, there's often course-specific fees and other fees. We do cover those as well. And then we also cover health insurance. If you're a domestic student, you have the option of opting out of that if you have other health insurance. If you're an international student, we do require that you are on this health insurance. I should also add that in addition to teaching assistantships and research assistantships, we have the less common graduate administrative assistantship. So administrative units in the university, like the graduate school, actually employ graduate assistants to help us with programming. So might be helping run a mentoring program, or might be helping my colleague Caitlin with marketing and other things like that. These are far less common. There's probably less than 100 of these on campus, probably far less than 100. So teaching assistantships and research assistantships are indeed the most common. Now, the availability of assistantships, again, does vary by program, and it varies by college as well. In most cases, if you are admitted to a PhD program, there's a very high degree of likelihood that you're going to be funded. In some programs, it's automatic. In other programs, you might have to reach out to faculty members, or there might be a separate application. When you look at master's degrees, whether you can get an assistantship or not is going to depend very much on that program. If you're applying to a program within the College of Arts and Sciences, you stand a good chance of being fully funded as a master's student. If you're looking at, for example, College of Engineering or the business school, it's going to be far less likely that you would be offered funding as a master's student. So that really sort of lays out how assistantships work. I do also want to make the point that if you're new to teaching, we will actually help train you to do this. So we have a really good teaching assistant program that all students have to go through. And then we do also have a specific program for international students, especially really to help international students understand sort of the norms of how we teach in the US, and understanding some of the cultural issues. As someone who was not born in the US, when I first came to the US, the style of teaching was very, very different to the country I come from. If you did want to find out more about assistantships, we do have a very detailed assistantship frequently asked questions page. And so, that will give you a lot more information. But I do want to state one very important thing. If you're interested in an assistantship, the best person to talk to is the graduate program director for the program that you're looking at. They most likely are the person that handles assigning those assistantships. We do not do those centrally in the graduate school. So we have lots of people emailing about assistantships, and what I'll do is I'll introduce them to the program director. This link here, if you hopefully you can see my cursor, that actually takes you to the program director list, and I'm going to quickly go there. And so this is actually a very important page as a prospective student. So you can look up the programs. It's an A to Z listing. So for example, if I wanted to look at applied statistics PhD, it's going to give me a lot of information about, say, priority deadline. So, so it's got information about deadlines. It's got information about what semesters they admit students, application requirements, expectations for statement of purpose, test score requirements, English proficiency requirements, and then very important importantly at the bottom, it has the contact information for the program director. So in this case, Marcus Perry. So we put that in there so that it's easy for you all to find this information. All right, going back to the funding page. So as I mentioned, assistantships, that's the most common source of funding. The next most common source is fellowships. And to give you an idea, again, I said there's probably about 1,800 students on assistantship. There's probably about 120 students on fellowships. So it's a much smaller amount. This is probably, I think most people consider this a more prestigious level of funding. The funding level that you receive if you're awarded one of these is very, very similar to an assistantship. And again, it does include a stipend, typically $20,000 or $25,000. We just introduced some new fellowships. It does include a tuition scholarship. It does include payment of fees, and it does include health insurance. However, where this differs from an assistantship is this does not have a work requirement. We're giving you a fellowship because you are a really, really good student, and we want you to come to Alabama and continue to be a really, really, really good student. So that's really the goal of the fellowship. And there's a lot of different types of fellowship. There's single-year fellowships, there's multi-year fellowships. But the key for the bulk of these is that you don't apply for these. You are nominated by the program that is admitting you. So what they are most likely doing is they're looking at the application pool. They determine who are the people that they would like to come the most, and they nominate the student for a fellowship. We then have a committee that looks at all those nominations and determines who we will actually award fellowships to. So the deadlines for these, well, I'll get to the deadlines in a moment. There are some different kinds of fellowship. Well, actually, sorry, let's talk about deadlines. Deadlines for current students was December 11th. There's two deadlines for new admitted students, January 15th and February 12th. So if you're interested in one of these fellowships, it's very, very, very important that your application is in as soon as possible. So for the January 15th deadline, because of Christmas, really the application needs to be complete and in review in the department next week. February 12th, you've got a little bit longer, but that's the sort of, that's where you're aiming. So the two main kinds of fellowships are grad council fellowships. So that is the most common type of fellowship. This is open to any full-time student. So if you've been admitted as a full-time on-campus student, you would be eligible for this. We also have another kind of fellowship. There's a few less of these. This is a NAP called the National Alumni Association Fellowship, and this is specifically for residents of Alabama. So if you're an international student, unfortunately, you're not eligible for this. If you're an out-of-state student, domestic student, you're also not eligible. So you have to qualify as an Alabama resident. We do also have a even less common fellowship called the SIGPI Fellowship. This is for students specifically from some partner universities that we have, or students who have participated in a summer research program at the University of Alabama. Uh, if by some chance some of you on the call are actually faculty at one of our uh, partner universities, we do have specific fellowships for that, but that is for specific universities in the US. Now, all these funding options I've spoken about so far are funded entirely within the University of Alabama. There are some others that are funded through other sources. So if you're a domestic student, you may qualify for our Southern Regional Education Board Doctoral Scholars Program. So this is designed for students whose goal is to be in academia. Funding for this comes jointly from the Southern Regional Education Board, which is a consortium of 18 southern states, and the University of Alabama. So if you're a doctoral student and you qualify for this, you are awarded 3 years of funding from the Southern Regional Education Board. University of Alabama provides tuition scholarships, and then you're guaranteed assistantship funding for the next 2 years. So it does represent a 5-year funding package. But again, you've got to have a stated goal of wanting to be a faculty member and being a domestic student. One other source of funding that is becoming more and more common on our campus is Fulbright funding. So we've been very successful in recruiting Fulbright students from other countries. So if you have been awarded a Fulbright, the typical way that we do this is the Fulbright Commission provides a stipend, so living costs, and it's actually very, very generous amount for living costs. And then the University of Alabama provides a tuition scholarship. If you're an international prospective student and you're not familiar with this, I would highly recommend that you visit the nearest Education USA office to you. Education USA offices are typically co-located with the US Embassy, but they can sometimes be in separate buildings. So they might be able to tell you more about applying for Fulbright funding. It's an excellent source of funding if you can get it. So, but it is extremely competitive. We do also have tuition scholarships for faculty and staff from our neighboring college, Stillman College, which is another university in our town. It's unlikely that folks on this call qualify for this. In terms of smaller scholarships, if any of you happen to have, if you are Alabama residents and you have parents or grandparents who graduated from the University of Alabama, we may be able to provide you with a $500 scholarship as well. So as you can see, there is the form there for that. Now, another very common question we get is on-campus employment. So On the University of Alabama campus, there are a lot of jobs. We have 6,947 employees on campus. So, as a domestic or an international student, you can work 20 hours per week on campus. And then this is increased to 40 hours per week in the summer and during other holidays. So, for example, during the Christmas holiday. So, this can be a good source of funding. It's not going to be enough to pay for your degree program because these are uh, fairly low wage jobs. They can be as little as $9 an hour, but there's others that maybe are as much as $20 an hour. It really depends on the unit that's doing the hiring. So on-campus employment is an opportunity that a lot of our students take. And it can also really, if you are working uh, in your department as an on-campus employee, it may give you an opportunity to get real life work experience that will help you get that job once you graduate. So that sort of sums up a lot of the funding that we can give to help you help you while you're at the University of Alabama in terms of sort of living costs. I do want to talk about a couple of other things that we do. So we do have conference and research funding. So when you come to the University of Alabama, we're very, very eager to pay for you to go to conferences, and if you have to travel for research, I help you with that. So, for most conferences in North America, the graduate school can provide up to $500. We actually collaborate with your departments, and hopefully they match that. If it's a conference internationally, $800 from the grad school, $800 from your department. So again, that's something that's very important to us because for your professional development, it's very important that you're going and presenting at conferences. And the reason we pay is not, again, it's important for you professionally that you are presenting, but it's also important that you go to these conferences and you network. Uh, obviously one of the things that you want to do at the end of your degree is get a job. And so we're going to provide you with lots of opportunities to help you with that. And getting a job is not just about applying to companies or going to career center fairs towards the end of your program. This is something you have to work on for the entirety of your degree program. So when you go to conferences, that's where you're networking. That's where you're getting to know the leaders in your field. That's how they get to know you. So that's something, if you're a PhD student, you start that year one. You make sure that people are getting to know you. So when it does come time to apply for that job, they know who you are already, and it's far more likely that they will hire you. And again, there's a lot of other things that we do to help you in that process. So a lot of professional development opportunities. Now, if you are a domestic student, you are also eligible for federal financial aid. It looks like there are quite a few changes happening in that area. So I do encourage you to stay up to date on that. And that includes limits to funding at the graduate level, changes in definition of what is a professional program, etc. So do stay up to date on that. And then in the rest of sort of in the following parts of the page, we really emphasize some federal grants and scholarships that are available. So, for example, from the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Energy, National Science Foundation. And again, if you're a domestic student, I really encourage you to look at that National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship, so what we call the GRFP. This is something that, again, a lot of our students have received. And is a very, very good source of funding because it provides you at least 3 years of funding through the National Science Foundation. So, and again, there's things like the GI Bill, etc. Now, there are a lot of other scholarship opportunities out there. We do limit what we put on this web page because it's always changing, and we want to make sure that we are just uh, displaying the best options for you. But do spend time actually looking up what other funding options may be available to you outside of the University of Alabama. And you know, a lot of our students, they might have an assistantship and then they have fellowships from a couple of other federal agencies, for example. And so that's always a very good idea. We do list a couple of others. So the Woodrow Wilson National Fellowship Program and the Fulbright program. This is for the Fulbright program here, we're looking more at domestic students traveling to another country for a while. The previous Fulbright opportunity I spoke about was for international students traveling to the US. So it does go both ways. Uh, in terms of other scholarship opportunities, um, there are some international scholarships that our Capstone International Center is more familiar with, and then these other opportunities that we're highlighting. So, in terms of, you know, I think I've covered most of the funding opportunities that are available, especially internally to the University of Alabama. I want to open things up for questions now and see what sort of questions you might have. And I think my colleague Caitlin will be helping me out with this.
Yes. I've been answering a lot in the chat and I've left some open that we can answer live. Do you want me to read those out, Andy, or do you want to?
I'm not sure that I can see them. So yes is the answer.
Okay. Okay. So someone said, I suppose the proof of funding required to process the I-20 is related to this assistantship fellowship.
Yeah. So if you apply to a program, you're admitted and you get offered a assistantship or a fellowship. When you apply for your I-20, and just for those of you that don't know what an I-20 is, I-20 is the document that is issued by the University of Alabama that basically says you're a qualified student, you have the funding necessary to apply for a visa. So that I-20 document you're going to take to the embassy in your country if you're an international student. With the I-20, what our Department of International Student and Scholar Services requires is they need to see that you meet that requirement for the cost of attendance. So that assistantship letter may meet all of that cost of attendance, and most of our assistantships actually do exceed that $56,000 amount. If, for example, for some reason it only covers $40,000, you would be required to show bank statements showing that you can afford the other $14,000. And I want you to take that very seriously because again, you know, 56,000 is what we've determined you need to live well, semi-comfortably as a student at in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And so you know, make sure that, you know, if you show an additional 14,000, that is available to you when you come to the University of Alabama. So yes, that fellowship or assistantship offer would be used to provide that proof of funding.
So the next question is, what is the criteria for being selected as a teaching assistant?
Good question. It's not an easy answer. It's really going to depend on the department. And so, um, some departments may require some prior experience, some departments may not. And it really, again, depends. If you're going to be grading, there's not much prior experience required. We will train you. Uh, Most departments, if you qualify for admission, they'll offer you, well, many departments, if you qualify for admission, they'll offer you an assistantship. There are other departments that are going to have separate applications, and in those applications, they may require you to provide more information that would tell them that you are qualified to have that assistantship. Um, in most cases for assistantships, again, we're going to train you in what you need to know to be an effective teaching assistantship. We're not just going to throw you in. So I would say most programs, there's really no prior experience. So no prior experience required. So it's really going to be based on, for most, on much of the same criteria as the admissions process. And so, I do want to make it clear that the majority of our programs, we're not just looking at GPA. We're looking at your statement of purpose. We're looking at your letter of recommendations. We're looking at your prior experience. These all go into the admissions process, especially at the PhD level.
Sure. The next question is a good one. I've never heard a student ask this, but it's a great question. So, can I get more than one funding? For example, if I get an assistantship, can I also get funding from a fellowship?
Well, that is a good question. So if you are awarded a fellowship, one of our grad school fellowships, you actually cannot be awarded an assistantship on top of that. The reason for that is we are awarding you the fellowship to give you the luxury of time to be the best student possible. And so we don't want one of our fellowship students to also have an assistantship because it takes away from the reason that we actually gave that fellowship. There are, of course, some exceptions, but they're extremely rare. So if you do get a fellowship, I would actually take advantage of the luxury that gives you where you don't have to serve as a teaching assistantship. You don't necessarily have to work for a professor doing research. Take advantage of that time and really explore your subject. Get started on your research if that's the case. Do as well as possible in your classes. And that's going to serve you very well because if you do really well in your first year, for example, that's going to open other doors. Whereas if you are overworked and you really don't have time to do anything properly, that's not going to open those doors. So again, if you have a fellowship, really take advantage of the luxury that gives you, and that luxury is time.
Sure. Next question is, do assistantships cover visa and travel costs for international students?
No, they don't. So we cannot cover those visa costs or travel costs as part of these. I know, that's a very expensive thing for folks, but that's not something we can do.
Next question is, how can one apply for teaching assistantships? Is assistantships available only to PhD students?
If I look at, what proportion of students on assistantships are PhD versus masters, the majority of our students on assistantship are going to be PhD students. And that's going to vary by college. If I look at engineering, it's going to be 80 or 90% of the students on assistantships are PhD students. If I look at the business school, it's going to be 90% or more are PhD students who are on the assistantships. If I look at our College of Arts and Sciences, it's probably going to be about 60% of students on assistantships are PhD students. So there is a preference to funding PhD students. we are that's that's the nature of a large research university like ours. But it doesn't mean that you can't get funded as a master's student. We do still provide funding to master's students, but it varies by college, varies by program.
Next question is, do master's students need to secure a faculty advisor before being considered for assistantships?
Very good question. And unfortunately, this is another thing that really varies by program. So there are some programs. So, for example, the biology and the geology program, even to get admitted, you've got to have identified an advisor. So if you haven't identified an advisor, had conversations with that advisor, and put that advisor's name in your statement of purpose, you won't be admitted. Uh, so, that's the reality of some programs. Uh, Again, many programs, if I think about sort of our humanities and social sciences in general, there, you don't need to have identified an advisor. Uh, and many of those programs actually, they are hesitant to speak to you until you've been admitted. At the other end of the spectrum, if we look at our College of Engineering, they will admit you without an advisor, but in order to get funding, you have to talk to an advisor because most of the funding comes at the recommendation of individual professors. So, mechanical engineering, for example, they'll probably admit you, but then you've got to go and talk to potential faculty members about them supporting you. So, with most universities in the US, there's a lot of variability of how this is done across graduate schools. One way that you have of decoding this is speaking with the program director for each of these programs. So I showed you that link, how to find the program director. That's very, very important because that program director can tell you how things are done in their department. And this could be, funding. How do you qualify for funding? It could be, how do you write your statement of purpose? Because some programs have very specific requirements for the statement of purpose. Or, what percentage of recommenders must be from academia versus industry, those sorts of questions. So keep in mind, that program director is a very, very important person. That is the person who's responsible for that program. That's the person who is most likely leading the efforts to admit students. And so they're the ones that know, and they'll tell you. They'll tell you how it works. We want to, because we want to get the best students.
So the next question is, I can't afford to study in the US. Do I have to apply for both a PhD and a master's to increase my chances of getting a fully funded offer?
Okay, another good question. There's a number of ways I could answer this, and I'm going to answer it in one particular way. Uh, if you are applying for multiple programs at a single university and you're applying for master's and PhD, uh, that makes it far less likely that you're going to be admitted because it makes you look unfocused. It makes it look like uh, you don't really have a good idea of your career goals. So I would really encourage you to, explore, what are your career goals and apply to the program that best fits your career goals, be it a master's or a PhD. Uh, if you are passionate about this, you know what you want to do, uh, and you make it very clear in your statement of purpose, that's going to greatly increase your chances of admission. Uh, and, I do want to emphasize that even in those programs where, they only fund 10% of their master's students, they're funding the top 10%. So if you're one of these top 10%, there's a good chance that you're going to get funding. So, if you're really good, we'll find funding for you somehow. Uh, so really look at what your goals are and be true to those goals and apply to the program that best gets you to where you want to be in terms of your career. That's the best thing to do.
Sure. So these next two questions kind of go together, but they're asking, when can I apply for assistantships? And does admission come automatically with assistantships, or will you need to apply separately?
Unfortunately, this is another one. It varies by program. Uh, I'll give you some direct examples. I'm a professor at the University of Alabama as well. If you were to apply to my program, Geology PhD program, if you're admitted, you would get a funding offer at the same time. Nothing else required on your part. Uh, if you were to apply to a program in our College of Education, so for example, higher ed administration, you may be admitted, but then there's going to be a separate application for funding. The same is true of our College of Communication and Information Sciences. In terms of deadlines, it varies. I mean, uh, if you're looking at being admitted and funded by biology, their deadline was 8 days ago for next fall. English department, again, I think that's this week, their deadline. Uh, most departments, in terms of qualifying for funding, you'll see a priority deadline. When you see that term priority deadline, that's the deadline that you need to apply by in order to be considered for funding. So keep a close eye on that. And a quick word about deadlines. If you see that the deadline is December 1, do not apply on December 1. I need you to be aiming for probably October 1 to apply. You always, always, always need to be applying well ahead of any deadlines. Some programs, as students apply, even before the deadline, they will probably be admitting people and providing funding. So in some situations, we may reach the deadline and they don't have any funding left. So be very proactive, apply well before deadlines. If I were to think about, what were the common mistakes that an applicant made? One of the most common is they're applying too close to the deadlines. If you apply December 1 and there's a December 1 deadline, if anything goes wrong with the application, you've missed that deadline. I do want to state the other big mistake that I see people do is not putting enough effort into that statement of purpose. That statement of purpose is probably the most important part of your application for a PhD application. You need to work on that a lot. That needs to be perfect. We see a lot of students who submit generic statements of purpose. You cannot submit the same statement of purpose to multiple universities. That is a major mistake. So please avoid doing that as well.
Sure. So we have a lot of questions left. I'm going to keep answering the ones in the chat. But any questions, guys, that are not submitted, honestly, after right now, we probably won't be able to get to. I am going to put in the chat the grad school email as well in case we aren't able to get to your question. But I'm going to keep going, but we do have a hard stop at 2 p.m. But if your question isn't answered at that time, please email us and we can get with you. So the next question that someone sent was, I have written to potential supervisors in my area of discipline. However, I received no reply. Will that reduce my chance of admissibility into UA? Will I get funding since I'm not in touch with any supervisors yet?
Well, again, it's going to vary by department about, if you need to be talking to a supervisor. With most departments, it doesn't do any harm to talk to a supervisor, largely so that when they are uh, when they're uh, when the faculty are considering who to admit, that they know your name. What was the first part of this question again? There was a good part there I was going to answer.
About trying to, they haven't received an
Oh,
answer.
yes, thank you, thank you. Yeah, this actually is a very, very important topic. Uh, we have a lot of faculty members, and because we're, a very prestigious R1 research university, we have a lot of very well-known faculty who are leaders in their field, and they get a lot of email, a lot. And so it's very important that your email, if you send one, stands out. So this is another thing where you need to spend a lot of time composing that email. And in that initial email you send, which is going to be the first impression that we have of you, uh, I want you to focus, if you're applying for a research program like a PhD or a research master's, you are going to focus 100% on what you want to do as a student. So, what is your research passion? How does that fit with that particular faculty member? And it's very, very important at this stage that you're not talking about funding. If we get an email from a student where the first sentence is talking about funding, it's unlikely that the professor is going to reply because that has really, what that is telling that professor is that your primary goal is funding, not research. So we want to bring in students whose primary goal is research. So talk about research in those emails. Make sure that that email is extremely well written. Never ever send that initial email without having other people read it, going through a number of drafts. Very, very important. Uh, if that's a very strong email and really speaks to that faculty member, they will respond. Now, it may take a few days, so give them 9, 10 days to respond. Again, we get a lot of emails. And if you're a really strong student and you really interest that faculty member, funding opportunities will potentially come. Just don't start that conversation with funding. That is probably the most common mistake that students make. So, yeah, take a lot of care with that email.
For sure. There are a few questions about um, funding and GRE scores. So can you kind of explain, the programs that don't require a GRE score, but do to be considered for funding? I know that can be confusing sometimes for students.
Yeah, well, firstly, the vast majority of our programs do not require a GRE score. GRE is becoming less and less common in the US. Uh, some programs, they do recommend that you send a GRE if you're interested in funding. If you don't have a GRE, though, I wouldn't worry about that too much. Uh, Most programs are going to give you funding based purely on your application materials. Most programs know that the GRE is not a predictor of success or is not a good basis on which to hire a student onto an assistantship. So don't go out of your way to take the GRE if you don't have one. Just make your application materials as strong as possible. That's really my main advice here.
For sure. Um, Someone said if your assistantship contract runs from January to August, what are other means for students to finance living expenses during the period after August? I've never heard of that.
Well, when you get an assistantship, uh, you get, the official offer letter, and it says, your assistantship, for example, runs from January to August. Uh, The first question to ask is, again, you're going to ask the program director this question. What are the chances of this getting renewed in August? Uh, for most of our PhD students, there are mechanisms to renew this. And so making sure that you're asking this question. I think, another big mistake that students make is that they will internalize this and get very anxious about this, whereas what you should be doing is actually going to your advisor or the program director and asking them that question. Is this going to be renewed? They absolutely understand that you need funding. And so, we all have been grad students before, so we understand where you're coming from. So yeah, really the biggest thing is find out if it's going to be renewed and ask the question. Don't get anxious about that. I get lots of students currently at UA coming to me with that question. And my first thing I tell them is, have you spoken with the program director? And in most cases, they have not. And so just try and reduce that level of anxiety. You're going to be very busy as a grad student. The last thing you need to be doing is worrying about funding as well.
For sure. So guys, any questions that were submitted after 1:45, we're just not going to be able to get to. I'm sorry, I'm trying to answer them in the chat. But they're mostly questions that we've either already answered. So be sure to check that answered tab, or look in the chat for links and things like that. But the next question is about, there's also some questions specific to like admissions. May just have to email us directly about those. So there's, yeah, very specific ones. It looks like I'm trying to find some that are actually relevant to funding. Um,
Well, I've actually found the questions now.
okay, perfect. Yeah. If you see any that you think you
Yeah.
could answer
So,
quickly.
so I do see one that says, does the admission letter come from graduate school? I've been accepted into the MSW program. The admission came without any fees on the letter. So whenever you're admitted, you're going to get a admission letter from graduate school. That is, just the standard admission letter that everyone's going to get. It's going to be signed by me, and it's just going to say you're admitted to grad school, and here are the next steps that you need to take. That letter from graduate school is never going to include funding. The academic department may follow up with their own letter, or it may have come before the graduate school letter. It's going to say something like, not all departments do this. We've recommended to the graduate school that you be admitted. Now, sometimes that also is going to provide funding details. So again, with my own department in geology, we'll send out a letter that says, we've recommended to grad school that you be admitted to the geology PhD program. Congratulations, this is your funding package. That's how my department does it. That's how a lot of science and engineering departments do it. Um, Other departments, it may be that, they don't consider anyone for funding until 2 months later. So this is really, again, where you've got to talk to the program director, and that program director will be able to tell you how that works for their particular program.
Sure.
I see one from Awini Moses. Uh, do I need to have publications in order to apply for a PhD? Generally, no. Now, does it make a PhD application stronger if you've got publications? Absolutely. But generally, no, you don't need that. I do also want to state that when you have publications, not all publications equal. We want to see peer-reviewed publications, if you have publications in high impact factor journals. Nowadays, there are a lot of what we call predatory journals, which are really not very reputable. If you have publications in those sorts of journals, that may actually count against your application. So, again, if it was my field in geology, we'd be expecting to see publications in things like American Geophysical Union publications, Geological Society of America, and the equivalents in other countries as well, if applicable. So be very careful with publications. Again, not all publications are equal, but the key thing is they're really not required for most PhD programs. We're looking for the potential for a student to be able to publish in the STEM fields, different in the humanities and social sciences.
Got 2 more minutes, maybe one more question. I don't know if it looks like there's a lot of questions about very specific things, or if you just want to wrap it up and we can close out here.
Well, I saw one on fellowships, and there was a specific question about what is the last date to secure fellowships. If you are not admitted before February 12th, you will not secure a fellowship. So if you're interested in that, your application has to be complete and in departmental review well before February 12th. We're probably talking, early January. So, that's where you need to aim if you want to qualify for a fellowship. And my aim is to get as many students as possible who qualify for fellowships because I want to get really, really good students. And that's our overall goal at the University of Alabama. We want the best of the best. So we want you all to come to Alabama. We want you to do great things. We want you to get a great job. And we want you to become famous and make us famous in the process, just like many of our alumni. And I'll sort of wrap up with that. That's really what we're looking for at the end of the day. But thank you. And let's hope that the application process goes well for you, and let's hope that you can find the best funding possible. And you never know, maybe when it comes to orientation in August, I'll get to meet you all in person. So I look forward to that.
So thank you so much,
Thank
Dr. Goodliffe. We appreciate it. The recording will be on YouTube in the next week or so. You can also go ahead and go on our YouTube page and see other previously recorded GRAD Connect sessions. And then I'll also send a link to upcoming GRAD Connect sessions in the chat. Please sign up for any and all of those that are relevant to you. But just as an FYI, we do not offer application fee waivers for students who attend these sessions. So you're welcome to attend as many as you want, and we hope that you do because these are very informative and help you submit the best application that you can. But we're unfortunately not able to offer application fee waivers. So feel free to reach out if we can assist you in any way, and roll tide.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks for attending.